Hi there, my name is Liv Downing. I work as a psychologist and meditation teacher. And one of the techniques that I fell in love with many years ago is mindfulness. And I know many of us have heard the word mindfulness, but also many of us are quite confused about what that actually is. So mindfulness is not the same as meditation. Meditation's more of an overarching term for formal mind, body, heart training, really. And mindfulness meditation is one form that we can practice. I'll make another video on meditation, but I thought I'd share with you this really wonderful metaphor that my gorgeous mentor, Craig Hassed, developed and shared with me about 15 years ago when I first learnt this technique, just to explain what mindfulness is and why it's so helpful and so powerful in our daily life. So, and just to be clear, to practice mindfulness, we don't need to meditate. Meditation is super helpful. It's like the formal training of the mind, but we can still live mindfully and still benefit from this amazing technique just by living with awareness. So I'd like you to imagine that you are standing on a train platform. And it's one of those center platforms where there's trains heading in both directions. And you're here. And you're wearing a top hat because you can and smiling because it's a sunny day. And so there's trains heading in both directions, and the center platform, however, represents the now. It represents the present moment. A really famous study that came out of Harvard, again about 15 years ago, has shown that about 47% of the time, so about half of our lives, our mind and our body are disconnected. So that's to say we're not actually thinking about what we're doing. You know, we're in a meeting and we're thinking about the next meeting, or we're talking to our partner and we're thinking about our to-do list. And that's just part of the human condition. But the good news is we can change that. We can build our capacity to pay attention to what's happening in the present moment, to be here now. So just imagining you're standing on this train platform, there's trains heading in both directions, and these trains represent our thoughts. So when we're not present, when we're not thinking about the now, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about the future or the past. Now, when we spend a lot of time thinking about the future, for many of us, we tend to experience high degrees of anxiety and fear. Because we're playing all those what if stories, what could go wrong, what might happen. Now, I'm not suggesting we don't plan for the future, we don't write to-do lists, we don't anticipate potential problems, but for many of us, we get obsessed with the future. And when we spend time in that mind state, before we know it, we find ourselves in stressed out land. Our head's spinning, we're never really present, we're constantly distracted. And I know so many of us can relate to that. And then there's the opposite, there's the past thinking. And for those of us who tend to spend more time in the past, we're often plagued with feelings of guilt or shame or regret. And again, I am absolutely not suggesting we don't reflect on the past, because we need to. We need to learn from the past. We need to reflect on, what we did well, how we could have done better. But so many of us set up camp in these swamps of negative emotion. And before we know it, we find ourselves in bummed out land. Bummed out land. And we feel flat and exhausted, and no wonder, because we've been running these stories about what we coulda, shoulda, woulda, over and over, and our body just gets exhausted. And yet we can spend time here. We can choose to be here in the present moment. Now, mindfulness teaches us that we have 3 access points to the present moment. They are our body, our breath, and our senses. Body, breath, and senses. Just tune in now. What is your body doing? How is it feeling? Notice your breath. Noticing it come and go. Tune into your senses. What can you hear, taste, smell, see, feel? Mindfulness is not difficult. Just remembering to do it is the most challenging part about this work. Okay, back to our metaphor. So what would happen? What would the authorities do if passengers stopped taking the trains to the future or to the past? What would they do? There was no more business. There were people just standing around on the platform. The authorities would shut down the trains. They'd stop them running. And the same thing happens in our brain. It is called neuroplasticity. Whatever we practice grows stronger. The more we worry, the more we plan for the future and anticipate things that might go wrong, the better we get at that, the more automatic that becomes. And then we stimulate all of the hormones, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the go, go, go. And the same goes for the past. The more time we spend regretting, shaming ourselves, the more habitual that becomes. And before we know it, we're living in a cloud of sadness. And so mindfulness can not only help us to live a more awake and more conscious life, but it can actually support us to change the structure and therefore the function of our brain. How cool is that? It is by far the most empowering therapeutic technique I have ever come across. So to start your journey of mindfulness, it's really as simple as a matter of coming to your body, coming to your breath, coming to your senses, literally coming to your senses. Staying on the platform, watching the trains go by, jumping on some of them occasionally. Of course we need to plan, and of course we need to learn from the future and the past, but we don't need to become obsessed by them. So that is Mindfulness 101. It's simply paying attention, being present, and then 102 is really bringing kindness, curiosity, non-judgment, a whole lot of other really deep and helpful attitudes or mind states, which I can explore in another video. Take good care. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my website is livemindfully.com. That's L-I-V, mindfully.com. You can shoot me an email, olivia@livemindfully.com, and I teach both public meditation classes and also do one-on-one therapy and coaching. Take good care, be well, stay mindful.